Hey, thank you so much for joining another episode of Celeste Therapist Podcast. My name is Celeste. I'm a therapist from Boston. If you've never been here before, I appreciate you being here. I've been podcasting since 2018. What we do on this podcast is we are talking about things that we go through, and then I kind of talk about ways that we can get through some of the struggles that we have. We are wrapping up our three-part series on all about love. And the first episode, which is episode 524, we talked about the origins of love, like where does love come from, like what it is. A lot of times we think it's a feeling, but I promise you it's so much deeper than a feeling. If you're battling love and understanding it, go to episode 524, celestetherapist.com/524. You can find it streaming on all podcasting platforms. 525, we talked about understanding why love is so hard. A lot of times we want something healthy, but we really don't know what it looks like. And it feels like this battlefield because we're fighting our old conditioning with something we're trying to do. And if we're not mindful and self-aware, the old conditioning will win. So that was episode 525. 526, today we are wrapping up the series on All About Love. We're talking about self-love and cultivating healthy relationships. If you want to work on loving yourself better, if you want to work on having better relationships, this episode's for you. But if you have not listened to the first two parts of the series, I highly suggest that you go backwards, listen to those series, those episodes, and kind of come back to this. I also give homework assignments on these episodes. So if you're new here, feel free to grab a notebook and a pen, take notes. Don't let this be the last time you allow yourself to hear this content, because you can also read it, right? Make it like it's a class that you're taking every other week. These episodes drop bi-weekly, and so you can look at it as if you're taking a class on self-development, because my goal on this podcast is to help shift the way you think. And when you find yourself struggling, a lot of times you get stuck in some of the faulty thinking and the ways that you've been operating, and having content like this amongst other content, but it can help your mind develop new ideas, new relationships with the way that you've been framing things, and new awareness, right? All of it's really good. All right, so let's jump into this content. And then if you are new here, I always like to give some visuals to help you follow along. I'm a very visual learner, so that's why I do that. So in this episode, we are talking about self-love, the role of discipline in self-love, and then practical tips for nurturing love in relationships. All right, so what is self-love, right? If we're going to talk about self-love, let's start with a working definition. You may have heard it thrown around in places, but like, what is it really? And I want to be clear, literally everything that we're going to talk about today, you do not need money to buy. You know what that means? You can't use the excuses what you don't have to start this journey, right? Everything that we're going to talk about today are things you can literally start right now in the comfort of your own home. That's the whole reason why I developed this podcast, because I realize people allow what they don't have to stop them. And let's be honest, having access to money can help make things a lot easier when you're on a certain journey. But then if we don't have that access, do we just say we're not going to do it? And so I refuse to be the person that gives up on my journey, on my life. I literally did so many things. If you are a longtime listener, you know, I did a lot of things to start this journey without funds. What I have now is not what caused me to get to this point. It's me working with what I have that caused me to get to this point. So I just want to make sure we're clear on that. So let's start with this working definition of what is self-love. So self-love is the state of appreciating, accepting, and valuing yourself. Already people are probably like, dang, I don't know if I value myself the way I should, right? Do I accept myself and who I am? This involves treating yourself with the same kindness and respect you offer a friend. It's a foundation for well-being that includes practicing self-care, setting healthy boundaries, and forgiving yourself for mistakes, and embracing both your strengths and your weaknesses. As you can see on no parts of this did I say self-love requires you to go get your nails done, get your hair done, go get a massage. Are those things helpful? Absolutely, right? A lot of times when we think about self-love, we think about the tangible things. Everything I just described is not tangible, it's very intrinsic. It's the things that are inside, deep inside of you, setting healthy boundaries, forgiving yourself, right? Making sure you are embracing the good and the bad, the joys and the downs, right? You cannot just embrace one part of you. You can't turn off the parts that are hard. You think you may be turning it off because you are overworking, you're adding more things on your plate. You may think you're turning it off, but I promise you you're not. And so if you want to work on self-love, all of the things I described in that working definition is going to require you to work through that. You're going to have to really work on appreciating who you are, everything that you've gone through. I have not done everything right in life. I have not done everything according to the way that I wanted to do it. But I promise you, when it didn't work out, I allowed myself to accept that this didn't work out and look at a new avenue and a way that I'm going to move forward. So these are some components of self-care, right? So we talked about what self-care is. Now, what are the core components? So the acceptance, right? So I'm embracing all of me, my imperfections, my insecurity, recognizing my worth, right? Kindness and compassion. So I'm going to treat myself with empathy and understanding, especially during hard times. A lot of times we talk to ourselves worse than we would talk to anybody else. The things that we beat ourselves up for, if it was somebody that we love that came to us with the same scenario, we would never even think about talking to them the way we talk to ourselves, right? And we do it so naturally that we don't even realize we're doing it. When you work with me, when people work with me, or even if you've been a long time listener on this podcast, you know I'm always going to say you're with yourself 24/7. Like, do you want to walk around with somebody that's bullying you, or do you want to walk around with somebody that's motivating? Those voices that are happening internally where you're doubting yourself, where you are beating yourself up, that is not your voice. Those thoughts that are going on in your mind are the thoughts of the experiences you've had in the past, the things that people have talked down to you about. And so, if you don't give your mind new avenues to work on looking at life differently, it only has access to what it's been exposed to. So, if you've had a hard life, and you haven't done anything to work through those things that you've gone through, your mind will only understand the conditioning that it's had. Your mind is doing what it's designed to do, right? You have to start being in control of what's going on. Don't allow your mind to just control you. Don't allow your thoughts to control you. Be an active participant in what's going on. Self-care, right? This is another component of self-love. You got to start prioritizing your physical, psychological, and spiritual well-being through things like working out, eating, right? And when I say working out, it's not about going to the gym. Get up and move your body. When you start to move your body, something happens because these ways that you feel stuck, you start to feel differently. Even when people are sick, when they're in the hospital, they had surgery, little by little, the doctors are getting them to, hey, let's move a little bit. We don't want things to get stuck. We don't want you to get stiff. I remember when I had a C-section with my child, and I remember they gave me medicine, but they got me up. You need to start moving, get your bowels moving, get things going, right? Physically, literally, moving your body is important. When you move your body mentally as well is very important. What you put in your body, right? We are living in a time, if you are in America, I know I have listeners in other parts of the world, but in America, they do not care about what ingredients are going on in the food that they give us. They're just looking at how can we produce more product with less money, right? We're all about consumerism and capitalism and how much money we can make. You'll be surprised the amount of things that they put in our foods are not allowed in other countries. What you put in your body matters. Moving your body matters. Trying to work on your sleep routine, it matters, right? These things matters when it comes to self-love and taking care of yourself. That goes into it as well, right? All of those things that I mentioned are going to go into self-love. So self-care, making sure you're prioritizing your spiritual well-being, right? What are you feeding your soul? This podcast, if you're listening to this, you're feeding your spirit. I listen to something every day. It's like medicine to my spirit. I wake up in the morning and I put something on and it really feeds me. It's talking about, I'm listening to things that talks about the mind and how to maintain control and looking at what is happening, not focusing on what isn't happening. I speak the way I speak. I walk in alignment the way I walk because of all of the things I am embracing. I've said this before in the podcast. When we are physically hungry, we will go to the refrigerator and feed ourselves. When we are feeling spiritually depleted, we don't do that. We don't ask ourselves, what am I feeding my soul? Right? Have I been around a lot of negative people? Have I been only watching negative things? Have I been just stuck in bed? Right? When you're struggling spiritually, when your soul feels depleted, ask yourself, what have you been doing lately? You'll be surprised when you start to take inventory of what you've been doing with your life. You'll start to see like, dang, I haven't really been doing the things that fill my spirit. You can go, it's harder to work on building yourself up. It's easier to tear yourself down, especially if that's been part of your conditioning with your upbringing. It's an unfortunate fact. It's easier to gain weight than it is to lose weight, right? You know, Thanksgiving just passed and you had all that food and maybe you was on a certain, trajectory, and then you're like, how the heck did I gain all that weight? And how did I do that much damage? The damage to going backward is easier than it is to move forward. Right. So knowing that that's the case, being intentional about your journey is even more important, especially if you live in America. We don't live in a society that actually wants to see us heal and do well. Because if it wanted us to be well, then this would be something they would talk to us about in our doctor's visits, right? They wouldn't say, oh, you're having trouble sleeping. Do you want me to prescribe you something? They would say, well, what's going on in your life? Has anything changed? What's your nighttime routine looking like? I was physically sick for 2 years and seen over three doctors. Not one doctor said, let me check this girl's vitamin D, right? I checked my vitamin D and found out that I was so deficient. When I got myself back to my optimal level, I haven't been sick in over a year because my body was fighting itself. Right. And I think about these small things. I just go to the pharmacy and over the counter vitamin D pill made everything better. But I end up spending so much money going to doctors, paying for deductibles because America doesn't want to see us do well. Right. This isn't me being paranoid. This is me being in this mental health world for over 20 years and seeing the way things work out and seeing the way things run. And if you don't work on having a mind of your own, I promise you, you will be sucked up by the chaos of society. Society is very chaotic right now, right? And if you don't want to walk in alignment with chaos, then you have to start working on doing things differently and thinking for yourself. Creating boundaries is another core component of self-love. So when you start enforcing limits in your relationship with your own behavior to protect your emotional and physical health, it looks differently. Boundaries is so important. They're not for the other person, they're for you, right? My friend Sean said, when you create boundaries, it will expose the toxicity in relationships. I've been in this field for a long time. I've worked with people on the beginning of their journey. The people that have been on the beginning of their journey to where they are now, some people are no longer in place, not because they've passed away, but because they realized that they weren't good for them. Sometimes some of the relationship you've built has been because you have been a giver and not received anything. When you start saying, you know what, I'm going to work on practicing self-love and working on myself and creating boundaries, people in your life will struggle with that. And unfortunately, they're not going to go on this journey with you. That's the hard part of this journey of self-love. Forgiveness, right? That's another core component of self-love. Letting go when you make mistakes and reframing from self-blame. You got to let it go, right? Sometimes the things that we've done and the way we've operated has been because we've been just trying to survive. And I don't want you to beat yourself up for trying to survive. Once that awareness kicks in and you recognize, damn, I can't believe I was operating like that or I was doing that way, you're going to be like, you know what, Celeste? I see how you've had to do that to survive. It's okay, right? We're doing things different now. The way that you speak to yourself, it matters. It's so important to be kind, have grace with yourself, right? You may have gone through so many things. And as you become aware, if you are not compassionate with yourself, it's going to be a harder journey to getting to where you want to be. So those are some core components of self-love. Um, Let me just X out of this. Feels like it happens all the time. All right, so the next slide, What are the benefits of self-love, right? I mentioned some of this earlier, but your mental health starts to improve when you start to work. And I am a living testament of this. I promise you I am. When I started to work on those core components that we just discussed, I literally had to cut people off, right? I literally had to start getting up and moving my body, even when I don't feel like it. Your mental health improves because now you're not dealing with so much anxiety and so much stress, right? It's not that the situations aren't coming up. So let's say you have a friend that's always wanting something and you struggle, like, why do they call me to watch their kid all the time? And because you've been practicing like boundaries and self-love, like you're saying no, you refrain from saying, why do they want me to watch their kid to every time to why am I always saying yes? Right? People only ask you to do things because they know you're going to say yes. Other people may have boundaries. You don't. And when you start to have boundaries, you're not stressing out over things you don't have control over. I cannot allow myself to be stressed because somebody's asking me something. I'm gonna have to put boundaries up just because I feel bad and I'm like, oh, I want to do it, but I have all these things. Should I do it? It's like, no, like I have all these things and I can't do it. When you're practicing self-love, your confidence starts to look different. You'll start to have a sense of self-esteem and your confidence starts to be more higher, right? Because you're starting to do the things you say you're going to do. You're not feeling the depletion of the world, right? You're having some inner peace taking place. When you are working on self-love, your relationships get stronger, right? Because it helps you set better boundaries and build stable connections. When you are working on self-love, right? Especially for people that are struggling in a relationship that doesn't feel right, right? Like some people may be attached, right? We talked about love and attachment in the last episode. If you have some relationships that you're in, and you're like, I know this isn't for me, but I don't know how not to be a part of it. Self-love is going to help you do that work, right? And this is what I tell people when they're in relationships and it's not healthy and it's not the best for them. I recognize that it's hard. Some people have a hard time just going cold turkey. I'll say, you know what? Let's just start working on you. When you start working on you, I promise you the clarity that you're going to get around the relationships that you're in. And these are not just intimate relationships, it could be work relationships, friendships, family dynamics. The clarity that you're going to start to get, it'll be hard for you to be around them anyways, right? You'll slowly start changing up the connections and the ways that you've been engaging with them. It's going to look different. So don't worry about stressing yourself out about, oh my gosh, how do I get out of this? Let's just start focusing on you. That's literally the remedy for getting more clarity. Sometimes the people in your life may jump on the bandwagon. They may be like, you know what? Celeste has these boundaries. Okay, I'm not going to call her anymore to watch my kid, right? And she's still my friend, right? That can happen. Does it happen often? No, but it can happen. I've seen that happen where people will fall in alignment with the direction that you're going in your life. The last thing on the benefits of self-love is increased resilience, right? So when you're working on loving yourself, it's going to allow you to handle life's challenges and setbacks. It's going to look differently. It's not going to feel like the end of the world, right? Sometimes we're so depleted. Like think about a battery like on your phone. Like when the battery's about to go low, let me plug it up, right? Before I lose complete access to my phone, right? We do that. It's so easy to do that. We can look at it and see when it comes to ourselves, we don't recognize our batteries low. We're still doing any and everything for every and anyone, and we're almost on E. We're literally shutting down, right? If you can work on self-love, you're not going to be doing any and everything for everybody. You're going to be able to start your day with you, right? And it's not about, you may not have 1 or 2 hours to like slowly start your day into you. It could be 5 or 10 minutes. I promise you it makes a difference. And so as you begin to work on loving yourself, you're going to find yourself being able to have a different level of resilience where it doesn't feel like everything's falling apart every time something happens. Now, let's talk about the role of discipline and self-love, right? Because we talked about self-love, what it is, and the importance of it. Some of us know this, but we don't understand why is it that discipline matters when it comes to self-love? So, discipline is a powerful form of self-love because it involves making choices that are going to benefit you long term over immediate gratification. And you all know I've talked about the importance of not leaning into the immediate gratification, right? And I'll give you an example of that. Showing love for your future self. It's about consistently taking purposeful action, such as setting realistic goals, honoring commitments, and prioritizing your health, which increases your self-worth and builds a sense of accomplishment. Discipline is not punishment, right? Some people struggle with the idea of discipline. It's not punishment. I promise you it's not, but it's about loving yourself enough to do what is necessary to achieve the potential life that you are trying to build. And when it comes to prioritizing um, long-term goals over immediate gratification, I give this example a lot in the mornings. So I have a lot that I'm doing, right? I'm a business owner, I'm a mom, I'm a partner. I have this podcast, I have clients, I have clinicians that work under me. Like I have a very full life. And I have a life where I'm planning it out, right? It's on my calendar. And so I recognize that when I waited to put my workouts and moving my body to the middle or end of the day, it's hard to take place because there's always something going on. So I said, you know what, Celeste, like because you know this is going to help you, let's move it to the beginning of the day. I started moving it to 5 in the morning. I always used to be like, how do people get up at 5 in the morning? Like, that's wild, right? Because I would do it later on, right? Before kids, before business, before, I didn't always do all these things that I'm doing. I've added things on my plate little by little. And so I said, let me move this to the beginning of the day. And so 5 o'clock in the morning, it's dark, my bed feels good, it's warm, my man's sleeping and I want to stay asleep, but the alarm goes off and I get up. You know why I get up? Because I know if I take that immediate gratification in that moment and I don't get up and I do not create time for me, and then all day I'm pouring everything out to everyone else, I am not going to feel good at the end of the day. Like I recognize that's the case. Early on in my career, when I was struggling and feeling all of this empathy for people, and I was like, this work is so hard. The missing factor that I was missing is I was not pouring into me. And so now pouring into me is non-negotiable and it happens before anybody in this house wakes up. Does that mean that you have to have the same formula? No, it doesn't. That wasn't 5 o'clock in the morning was not always my formula. Other formulas worked out when my lifestyle was different, when I didn't have this business that I was creating, when I didn't have this podcast and these kids and everything else that goes along with my life. But as my life changed, I made adjustments. What maybe have worked for you 5 or 10 years ago, the problem probably is you need to adjust and figure out what's going to work for you now. And so I made adjustments. And so now I don't take that immediate gratification because it doesn't help me. That extra sleep, okay, yeah, that feels good in the moment. But then long term, going to the bar after work with your coworkers because you had a stressful day. Okay, you do it here, you do it there, right? You're drinking in the moment. It feels good, right? The wine tastes good, right? You feel relaxed, right? I just need a little bit of wine to relax me. But then what are you looking like when you wake up in the morning? Are you getting adequate sleep? Right? How does your body feel? Are you feeling more sluggish? Because every time you're having a stressful day at work, you're going and having a glass of wine or you're going to the bar, going for a walk, right? It's not something that people say, oh, I had a stressful day. Let me go for a walk, right? Like, why isn't that the norm? I think that's wild. That's not the norm because that leads to long-term health and different things. Going to the bar is more of a normal thing that people do when they find themselves feeling stress, right? There's no like, really, you're gonna go to the bar, right? If you can work on looking at the way you are allowing your immediate gratification to take over, you'll start to see different changes in your life, right? Going for a walk after work, going for a stretch, playing a meditation on your way home from work to try to decompress, those are not things that we're taught, right? We're taught about food, alcohol, sex, drinking, sugar, food. Like we have all these addictions to mitigate the stress that we're under. And so now we're putting our healing in the moment in another resource and not internally. And then when we think about those resources of food, liquor, drugs, whatever it is, right? Does that make us feel good long term? Does it allow us to accomplish our goals? Like we got to start being honest with ourselves and what that looks like. What is it that we're going to choose, right? The choice is ours. And society kind of rewards the whole bar and the things that we do for the immediate gratification, but the other stuff nobody really talks about. Who's going to get paid from me going for a walk, right? Who's going to get paid from me listening to a meditation? It doesn't sound like it matters. The first time you do it, it may even feel hard to do. It may feel foreign. You can build your system up to enjoy those things. I used to party Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, go to school, work, right? I was doing all those things. I couldn't wait. If you told me on a Friday night I was looking forward to putting some fuzzy socks on and reading or watching a Netflix series, I promise you I would have thought that was wild. Like I swear to you, I would have been like, no, like that's who wants to do that? Like that doesn't sound appealing. Like staying at home on a Friday night, you know how much is popping on a Friday night? And so if you can work on going against the grain and recognizing like it's nothing wrong with going out on a Friday night, but if you're doing it every weekend, that's the issue, right? So be mindful of how you are allowing immediate gratification to take over your life. How do you foster discipline, right? How does discipline foster self-love? So when you are disciplined with your self-love that you're giving yourself, you're prioritizing long-term well-being, so it helps you resist short-term pleasures, right? When I create a discipline, now that I get up every morning, even on the days where I don't have to go to the gym, my body still gets up, right? Like it's so used to that, right? Um, Build self-worth. So when you're following with your goals, you prove to yourself that you can be trusted with what you set out to do and increase your self-confidence and your respect for yourself. One of the things I tell people to do when they are working on trying to build their confidence and discipline, I say, if you're not making up your bed, you can just start with making up your bed. It sounds small, but that's what we need. We need the small stuff. So then you be like, oh, shoot, like I made up my bed all week. People will come to me in session and be like, yo, Celeste, I made up my bed all week. Like, or I made up my bed 4 times this week. Like, I'm really proud of myself. I literally work with people around being proud of the small moments because they matter, they add up. They're telling your mind a story. They're telling your mind the things that you're learning how to be grateful for. When I go hiking and I'm in the woods and I'll look at the trees and I feel so good. And I'd be like, I cannot believe this is here. Like, this is so beautiful. I never used to think that way. I never said, let me go to the hike and look into nature and I felt good, right? I worked towards that. It started with making up my bed. I started make my space, like the area where I sleep, where I live, made sure it was organized. It was not a lot of things around. I recognize like that affects my mind. When I have clutter literally in my space, it clouds my mind, right? These little things matter. Don't and if you're in America, you live in a society that only rewards or pays attention to the bigger things that are happening, to the degrees or the houses or the cars or the marriage, right? It doesn't celebrate like, wow, that you haven't been moving your body and you walked twice this week. That's so dope. Like I say that and I really mean that, and it feels good to share that with other people and to hear them come back and share their wins, especially when they haven't been used to sharing them, right? So even if you don't have nobody to share those wins with, you need to big up yourself, like say it to yourself out loud. The role of discipline, right? It creates a sense of control. So when you start taking action, even when it's difficult, it gives you a sense of agency over your life and a feeling of fulfillment. Too many times people struggle with feeling like everything is happening to them and they have no control over their life. When you start to work on doing the things that was within your control, it really helps you have a sense of groundingness and peace. When the pandemic happened, I was in the same boat as everybody else. I didn't know what was going on. So I would tell people, like, let's work on what we have control over. Let's get up in the morning. Let's move our body, right? Let's pay attention to make sure we're eating, make sure we're stretching. Like, what do we have control over? That's the only thing I had access to give people. That was what I was doing. I was looking at what was in my control. And so I help people see the importance of looking at what's in their control to help them on this journey. And so when you can work on being disciplined around giving yourself self-love, right? The things we talk about, the boundaries, the forgiveness, when you can work on the discipline piece, you start to feel like you're more in control. The world can be falling apart, and I feel like it literally is right now in this moment in 2025. It feels like it's falling apart. And despite the fact that I see the things that are happening in the world and it makes me very sad, there's something inside of me where I have some sense of inner peace. And it's something I can't explain, but I feel it. I feel grounded, right? Am I oblivious to what's going on? Absolutely not. I speak to people every day. I listen to pain all the time. And when because I am a very disciplined person with how I do things, I can feel the pain, I can see the pain, but I am also able to experience joy. And that's something that's so hard for many people to do. The role of discipline, it turns your dreams into reality. I'm a living testimony of that. Um, I'm Celeste the therapist, right? Uh, I wanted to get a state job and retire. Like I wanted to like work for somebody, make money. I never wanted to do this. I put one foot in front of the other, and I talk about this a lot. And one thing led to another, right? I have two books that I self-published. Like I have a business that I'm running. And sometimes I'd be like, damn, I can't believe this is real. This is real because I'm a very disciplined person. And then the last part of how discipline fosters self-love, it fosters resilience. So when you can push through setbacks and stick with your commitments, it builds mental and emotional toughness. So that's something that's important. There's going to be setbacks. But if we're working on being disciplined, we're not going to allow those setbacks to stop us with our goal. How do you practice self-love, right? That's important. I'm talking about self-love, but I want you to think about how you can practice it. Remember at the top of this episode, I said that none of this stuff is going to cost you money, right? I want you to be very clear on that. I don't need you to go out and buy another thing. I need you to just work on taking notes and looking at what you can do in this moment starting today. You start with small actions, right? We talked about making up the bed. That's one thing, right? Let's say you're already making up your bed. Is the area that you're in, is it clutter free? Like picking up things off the floor, making sure your space is okay, right? So let's say you are a clean and organized person. Are you getting to work on time, right? Let's start there, making sure we're going to bed at a certain time. Let's say that we're doing that, but we are struggling with our spirit, like we want to feel more fulfilled. What are you listening to? Find something to listen to every morning, right? There's so much content out there, right? Let's say you're struggling with anxiety. Look for somebody that's talking about struggling with anxiety, creating affirmations around the struggle that you have. So just pick one thing and then start with small actions. As you're doing that, right? So I said start with small action. That's one, if you're taking notes. Two, celebrate your progress. When you find yourself doing it, you got to be like, good job, Celeste. That was great. You made up your bed. Good job, Celeste. You listened to that video that you said you was going to listen to. Good job, Celeste. You went for that walk that you said you was going to go on. If you don't start celebrating the moments you go, and I hear you, like especially if you grew up in Caribbean homes, you were kind of taught the way that you've been raised is to look at what you aren't doing, right? You don't get celebration until it's something huge. And even when it's something huge, you still don't feel like you're doing enough. And so you got to really work on deprogramming yourself and work on celebrating the moments. As small as they are, they add up. I promise you they do. I don't want to gain the world and lose my soul. I don't want to have all of these things and struggle inside. Like, what is the point in having these things if I'm not truly happy? Be kind to yourself, right? Something we talk about all the time. Set realistic goals. If you're not moving your body and you talk about 7 days a week, I'm gonna go to the gym. Can you stop doing that? Like, no. You know what? 2 days out the week. I signed up for the Y. 2 days out the week, I'm gonna go. Now I'm gonna try to go. You gotta say, nope, 2 days a week I'm gonna go, and I'm gonna go Monday and Friday because I know that's a slower day for me. Like, be realistic with your goals. Yes, you want to be able to do things more, but if you haven't been doing them at all, start small, celebrate those moments, and build yourself up. Find your purpose, right? So connect your goals to a deeper why. Why am I going to the gym? Because I want to see my kids and their grandkids, and I want to have a healthy life, right? When you identify why you are doing something, it makes it easier to do it. When my alarm goes off at 5 in the morning and I don't want to get up for the gym in the morning, I remind myself, why am I doing it? Because I have a full case load today and I need to be present. This is my business, right? And I want to be okay for my partner. I want to be okay for my children. How am I going to help my children? How am I going to help the people that I work with if I'm not okay? So I connect my goals to a deeper why. And that fuels my motivation. I want to say with motivation, motivation isn't something that you use to only get you to where you need to be, because there are moments and days I do not feel motivated. Motivation is an added bonus. The discipline is what's going to allow you, regardless of if you feel like getting up or not. So the last section, right? We're talking about practical tips for nurturing love and relationship, right? We talked about self-love. What is self-love? We talked about the importance of discipline, right? How does discipline play a role in self-love? Now, I'm going to give you some tips on nurturing love in your relationship if that's something you're struggling with. So communication and connection is important, right? So you're going to be open and honest with your partner. That's important. You share your feelings, thoughts, needs, and fears directly with your partner, right? How do you foster nurturing love in relationships if you guys are not talking to each other authentically? Practice active listening. So you got to give your partner your full attention without judgment or interruption and validate their experiences. Just because if my partner says to me, I feel like everything I say is wrong. Literally, he said that to me years ago. And in my mind, I'm like, I don't feel like everything you say is wrong. But also, I had to recognize I don't know how what I'm saying is coming off to him. I had to let my ego down because my ego would be like, girl, that's not what you're doing. It doesn't matter what I think I'm doing. I have to recognize what I'm doing and how it's playing a role in how he's receiving it. Right. And then if I allow him to speak without speaking over him, without telling him, no, you're wrong. If I start doing that, he's not going to want to share things with me. He's going to keep it inside. He's going to walk on eggshells. So when you're talking to your partner and you're actively listening, be mindful that what they say may feel hard. It may not be how you think about them or life, but it's important you listen and be like, I hear what you're saying. I get that you feel this way, right? Like, I want to be mindful and understanding that this is what you feel. What can I do so that you don't feel like I am saying everything you do is wrong, right? What did I do that made you feel that way? That opens the line of communication. Expressing appreciation, so regular acknowledge and show gratitude for your partner's actions, qualities, and contributions. A lot of times we don't do that enough, right? My husband will fill my tank, and there's a lot of things outside of the house that he does that I just don't do. I don't like to change my oil. I don't like to go to the gas station, and there's a lot of things in the house that I do that he doesn't do, right? We have different strengths and weaknesses in our relationship, and when we do that, even though it's what we do, we always say thank you. Wow, thank you for doing that. I appreciate you. Right? That feels good to be appreciated. And I've been married for 17 years. We've been together for 23 years. And sometimes when people have been in a relationship for so long, that stuff just slowly fades away. You're not talking about like, oh, I appreciate you or what you love about your partner. You're just allowing the mundaneness of life to just go forward, and you are so used to it happening that you don't allow yourself to let your partner know that you're grateful. Prioritizing quality time, so making dedicated time to connect without distractions, engaging in activities that foster closeness and intimacy. It could be something as simple as going for a walk at night, having tea together, right? Watching your favorite show together, right? Those things allow for you guys to stay connected, creating some kind of shared rituals. Unfortunately, a lot of people are growing apart. Maintaining physical affection. So keep physical intimacy alive through touch and affection. When you're in a relationship, sometimes the physical intimacy piece, especially when kids get involved, when activities get involved, and these things happen, unfortunately, if you're not intentional about creating physical intimacy, it's going to start slowly fading away. So just be mindful of that. Supporting and support and growth, right? That's another way to work on nurturing love in your relationship. So support your partner's individual growth, right? You got, remember I said love, it wants to see the partner grow. Like if you know your partner enjoys let's just say your partner wants to be an electrician, right? And they're studying for the test, right? Being able to be like, "Hey babe, what do you need during this time to study for your test, right? How is that process going for you? Just asking a simple question can help and go a long way. Be emotionally supportive. So if you're being there for your partner during their vulnerable times, that's helpful. Practicing forgiveness. I told you I've been together for 23 years. We each had to do some forgiveness, right? For each other, for ourselves, and not hold on to it. The issue is like something happens and then we hold on to it and we're carrying to the next thing and the next thing. And that's why you'll see people, they may be together 20, 30, 40 years, but they're sleeping in separate rooms, not because they choose to, but because they can't stand the person. But hey, we're still married, right? Because they're holding on to things and people aren't changing. Now, it's one thing, you're practicing forgiveness and like the change is happening, but if the change isn't happening, then obviously you need to go back to the drawing board. But sometimes change is happening, but because you're holding on to the thing that hurt you, you have to recognize, can I still be in this relationship even with what has happened? Like sometimes things may feel like they're beyond forgiveness or beyond you being able to stay with that person. You got to be honest with yourself. And then if it's like, you know what, I can work on releasing it and letting it go, that's fine. Doesn't mean it won't come up. Yeah, it'll still come up, but it won't feel as heavy as it does when you're allowing it to take over your lens on your relationship with your partner. And then building trust. So building trust through being vulnerable, honest, and consistent with your support is important. And then the last part of the practical tips for nurturing love in relationships is conflict and balance, right? So manage conflict constructively. Fair fighting, right? You got to focus on one thing at a time. If I say, let's say I say to my partner, oh, you keep leaving your clothes out or whatever, and I'm looking at his clothes and it's out, and he was like, well, you never fill your gas tank. It's like, wait, what? What are we doing? Like, how do we get to talking about my gas that you fill up? We're talking about the clothes, right? So creating fair fighting rules is important. And one thing that is helpful, right, is creating intentional time to talk about the wins and the things that went well, and then the things that didn't went well, like creating intentional time, right? Where you are going to the drawing board. I always say this, businesses that are successful, the CEOs, the board members, they're having meetings. They're talking about the sales, the marketing, like what went well, what didn't go well, right? When you think about your relationship with your partner, you got to do the same thing. To expect for it to just magically continue to go and we're not having intentional conversations, I think is wild. It doesn't happen that way, right? When every week I look at like, okay, what do we have going on this week? What do we need to do? I'm gonna cook this day. You're gonna like we're checking in. We have he's an entrepreneur, and I am too, and we have four kids, two of them are in basketball. And so we have so many things going on top of my business, right? On top of the classes that I run, that we have to be intentional. We have to check in. Right? We can't just expect things to go and be fine. It's just not how life works, right? So being intentional about checking in with your partner, especially if you guys have full lives, don't expect for it to just all fall into place on its own. Respecting boundaries, give each other space when needed and respect the privacy and boundaries. Y'all know I talk for a living, right? I talk for a living. So if I'm like, well, we could just talk, like I would literally be be like, why aren't you saying nothing? Like I really would be upset that he wouldn't say nothing. I remember one time I decided to send him a text about how I was feeling. Da, 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 I was going off. And then he wrote back this long thing. I was like, oh snap. Like it clicked. Oh, he is a slower processor than me. He needs time to articulate his thoughts, and he does better when I write things because now he can read it and look it over, right? That changed the dynamic for me where, yeah, do I feel uncomfortable and anxious sometimes if I want to talk about something and he's not ready? Absolutely, I do. But do I impulsively respond and make it about him not wanting to talk to me? No, I don't. I'm able to recognize like what he needs and what I need looks different, and he is his own person. I don't have control over him. I think sometimes we feel a certain way, that inner child stuff. If you haven't listened to my series on inner child, please listen to it. That inner child stuff comes up and it comes up the most in relationships. And what happens is we start struggling with the way that we are feeling and we're allowing it to be projected on our relationship. And so he's not ready to talk. If I'm struggling with abandonment issues, which I do, my mind and my everything is like, oh shoot, he's abandoning you. He doesn't care. And it's like I had to check myself and be like, no, that's not the case. Like this is the way this man processes, and I got to let him have his process time. Just because we're in a relationship doesn't mean he owes me to talk when I say talk. Right? I think that's something that's important to remember as you are navigating like conflict and relationships. And then share responsibilities. So share the load of daily tasks out loud, especially women. I find women, we try to do everything. And it's like, if you wrote down all the things you did, we're doing too much, right? Learning how to be okay with saying you need support when you're in a relationship, it's okay. And then creating new experiences. So being able to explore new things together. It helps build anticipation, and it helps with the connection when you're learning new things together. Making sure you support each other's growth, right? That's important. And then let's talk about some homework, right? And so even though I'm saying, this homework assignment, this is something I need you to think about doing on a regular basis, right? Not something you just do one time. I need you to build it into your life. These things that I'm talking about are things that I practice all the time, every day, right? So we talked about self-love, what it is, the importance of discipline, right? And then how to create um love in your relationship, how to like make it work to nurture it, right? In order to nurture, you see, I left nurturing the relationship last because you got to practice self-love in order to do that. You can't nurture your relationship and you're not practicing self-love. When you're practicing self-love, nurturing your relationship looks different. So if you are struggling with self-love, right? I want you to think about how do I create a self-love action plan? So I'm giving you this and I want you to think about doing it. It may seem like, well, what's the point? I promise you, you're helping yourself build systems. So list 3 daily practices to nurture self-love. So one, practice gratitude, writing down 3 things you appreciate about yourself each day, right? I appreciated that I was able to um, work on my project today. I appreciated that I was able to finish the assignment that I said I was going to finish. I appreciate that I was able to go for a walk today, right? Like, I am grateful that I had the opportunity to do X, Y, and Z. What I'm grateful that I was able to have a good meal. Like I had a healthy meal. I haven't been eating well lately, and today I had a great meal, and I appreciate and I'm grateful that I was able to do that because it's helping me grow, right? 2, mindfulness or meditation practices. So spending 5 or 10 minutes daily focusing on your breath and being present, right? You're teaching your system how to get into the moment. And then the last one is engage in a joyful activity. So dedicate time each day to do something that brings you joy. It could be reading something, drawing, exercise, going for a walk, watching a show, right? These things that I'm mentioning is less than 20 minutes. Like it doesn't have to take that much time. So I'm writing down 3 things I appreciate about myself every day. Like I I'm doing that every day. That's 5 minutes. Mindfulness, 5 to 10 minutes. Let's say that's another 5 minutes. I'm gonna sit, I'm gonna be still, I'm gonna be present, and then I'm gonna engage in an activity. Let's say that activity is I'm gonna sit down and have some nice chamomile tea, right? That's another 15 minutes. Just sit and be present. Actually, having the tea and being mindful at the same time, we could kill 2 birds in one stone. I'm sharing this because I need you to see, like, I don't want you to go out and purchase something to practice these things. I want you to look at what you have, use what you have, and start now because it matters. So let's take a deep breath. That was a lot. I appreciate you for being here on this journey as we've like discussed all about love, right? And the importance of self-love. It's something that I'm so passionate about. I never ever 10, 15 years ago, this is not how the way I felt or thought about things, but and now in 2025, I think deeply about these things and how important they are. And I bring them into my practice with people. And when I'm speaking to people and when I'm talking about things, I bring this into the awareness so people can understand, like, yes, I know your business is hard or your relationship with your kids or your partner. Like, we're talking about all these things, but let's talk about self, right? Your relationships with the world looks different when you are working on that self-love. And as we've seen in this episode, self-love doesn't have to be about purchasing things, right? I understand money makes things easier, but we can't just magically make it appear. And so because I can't magically make it appear, does that mean that I don't allow myself to give myself what I need? And unfortunately, a lot of people aren't talking about it this way. And so we're not thinking about it this way. So I really want you to think about love and self-love in a way of like, how can I start right now using what I have in this moment? Right? That's so important. So I appreciate you being here. Where you can find me, right? If you're a first time listening to me, you just thank you for checking me out. I appreciate you. You can find me on Instagram. As I said, I have a wellness center, Shifting the Way You Think. I called it Shifting the Way You Think because I want you to really work on getting unstuck. We're on Instagram as STWYT. It's the acronyms. We're also on TikTok, and our website is stwyt.com. If you want to follow my personal page, I have a podcast page and a personal page, both Celeste Therapist. One has a dot between the words Celeste Therapist. And then on YouTube, if you're listening to this on audio and I love like watching the podcast on video. Like there's certain podcasts I listen to and I like watching the video on YouTube. So you can find me on YouTube. And if you are in the Stoughton area, we do have classes in person. And now we are actually going to have two of the classes that are going to be streaming online. So if you wanted to sign up for those, we have a trauma-informed yoga class that will be online. And we also, yeah, trauma-informed class. And we're also doing an intention class online starting this in December. So check those out. Go to stwyt.com. I appreciate you for listening. If anything I ever say resonate for you, understand you have the power to make the change. But first, you have to work on having faith and believing in yourself. And when you have faith and when you start believing in yourself, I promise you, no one can take that away from you. So until next time, beautiful people, I will talk to you later.